All right, welcome everyone to another deep dive. You know how this works, right? We take a big pile of information and we boil it down to the good stuff, just for you. And today, we're tackling a pretty massive story, something that's been told and retold across different faiths for centuries. The story of Prophet Noah.
Yep, that's the one. And to really get into it, we've got a transcript of this really interesting lecture by Dr. Othman Alchemies.
Yeah, he goes really deep on Noah's whole life, all about his mission from God, the stuff he had to go through, and like what we can all learn from it even today.
Right, our mission today, if you will, is to give you the key points. Like, what were the big events in Noah's life? What were the biggest challenges he faced? And, what are the lessons that we can take away from his story?
Okay, so right off the bat, we got to acknowledge that Noah is a seriously major figure. I mean, Dr. Alchemies calls him the second Adam, or like a smaller Adam.
Oh, interesting. I haven't heard that one before.
Yeah, and it actually makes a lot of sense when you think about it. The Quran actually says, you can go UANGA, she'll tick it out.
Oh, right. Meaning,
We made his descendants the survivors. Like, think about the flood. Everyone alive today is descended from the people who were on that ark with Noah.
wow, yeah, that puts it in perspective.
For sure. And on top of that, Noah is also considered one of the Uli al-Azm.
Now, for our listeners who might not be familiar, what does that mean exactly?
Yeah, good point. It means he was one of the most steadfast, like totally unbreakable prophets.
Gotcha. And Dr. Alchemies also mentions that Noah was the first messenger sent to Earth, right?
Yeah, and there's a subtle but important difference here between a prophet and a messenger.
Okay, I'm listening.
So Adam, peace be upon him, he was a prophet. Like, he provided that initial guidance for humanity. But Noah, he was the first one tasked with actually, like, spreading a divine message. Like, he had to establish a whole system of belief in a community that had, like, gone astray.
Yeah, okay, I see the distinction.
And there's this hadith, this narration from the prophet that really illustrates this point. It talks about the day of judgment. People are going to be going to Adam asking for help, but Adam's going to be like, go to Noah. He was the first messenger.
That's pretty powerful. It really shows how essential Noah was to the whole, system of prophets and messengers that came after.
Absolutely. And speaking of timing, there's been some debate about how much time passed between Adam and Noah.
Yeah, how long are we talking about here?
Well, a hadith in Ibn Hibban mentions 10 generations, but then Ibn Abbas says it was 10 centuries.
Whoa, quite a difference.
Yeah, and it all comes down to this word idi, which can mean either. So depending on how you interpret it, the timeline changes big time. But no matter what, Noah's story unfolds pretty early on in human history, post-Adam, right? And you can tell how important his story is because Noah's actually mentioned 43 times in the Quran.
Oh, wow. 43. That's a lot.
Yeah.
More than most other prophets, right?
I think so, yeah. It really hammers home the point that this is a story we need to pay attention to. But to understand why Noah was sent in the first place, we kind of got to rewind a bit. Like, what was going on back then that made his message so crucial?
Right. Context is everything.
For sure. So Dr. Alchemies explains that after Adam, humanity was actually like unified and believing in one God. Like, they were all on the same page, worshiping God alone. But then things start to shift and, well, Satan enters the picture.
Oh, figures.
Right. He starts introducing all these bad ideas. And one of the biggest ones was idolatry.
Idol worship. Right. How did that even begin?
Well, according to the lecture, there were these righteous people in Noah's community who passed away. And Satan, he's sneaky, he goes to their people and says, hey, why don't you make images of these guys, to remember them, to remember how devoted they were to God.
I mean, at first glance, it sounds almost harmless, like just wanting to honor their memory.
Right, exactly. The intention was pure at first, just remembrance, like a way to inspire their own worship of God. But then as time goes on and generations pass, Satan comes back.
Oh, no.
Yeah, and now he's saying these images are more than just reminders. He's telling them to seek intercession through them, like these images have some special power with God or something.
So it starts as a way to remember, then turns into a means to reach God, and before you know it.
Bam. They're straight up worshiping the idols. And the lecture even names these idols. Wad, Suwa, Yaglith, Yak, and Nasser.
Those are the specific idols Noah warned his people about.
Exactly. And doesn't this whole progression kind of ring a bell?
Yeah, it's a little too familiar, right?
Yeah, exactly. And Dr. Alchemies actually connects this to a hadith about a church in Ethiopia that was full of images. And the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he compared that to people who build mosques over graves and put images inside. He called them the worst of creation on the day of judgment.
Wow. That's pretty serious.
Yeah, it's like there's this consistent warning throughout history about how easily we can slip from honoring someone to actually worshiping them or their image.
Right. It's like we have to be super careful about our intentions, you know? Like, how do we stay on the right path and make sure that we're not accidentally straying from worshiping God alone?
Big question, right? And the transcript brings up another example, the story of the people of the cave. Some scholars say that the people who built a mosque over the cave, like trying to honor these righteous people, they were actually considered the most evil among them.
Hmm. So even though they might have had good intentions, they ended up doing something that went against the whole idea of worshiping God alone.
Exactly. And this is the world Noah is stepping into. People are worshiping idols, and God sends him to call them back to the right path. And what's really interesting is that Noah's approach was super comprehensive. Like he didn't just have one method.
Yeah, what do you mean?
Well, the lecture talks about how he was constantly preaching, day and night, secretly and openly, trying every single way to reach these people.
Right, he used all different types of
Oh,
dawah,
really?
right? Like different methods of inviting people to Islam.
Exactly. Like he used parhib, which means encouraging people by talking about the good stuff.
Okay, like what were some of the things he promised them?
He told them that if they sought forgiveness from God, they'd get more rain, more wealth, more children, and like amazing gardens and rivers.
Mhm.
The things that really mattered to them back then.
Yeah, makes sense. Appealing to what people value,
Right. But he didn't just focus on the rewards, he also used tarhib,
which means,
warning them about the consequences of their actions. He was straight up about the day of judgment and how painful it would be if they didn't change their ways.
gotcha, so a little bit of carrot and stick.
Yep, exactly. But he didn't stop there. He also used logic and reasoning. Like he'd ask them questions about creation, like who created the seven heavens? Who made the sun and the moon? How does God make things grow from the earth? And how will he resurrect us all?
Right, getting them to think critically about the world around them and how it all points back to God.
Yeah. But here's the thing that really blows my mind. The Quran says Noah lived among his people for 950 years.
950 years.
Yeah, imagine that. Preaching for almost 1,000 years. That's dedication.
Absolutely. And I can't imagine it was easy. I mean, even today, inviting people to Islam can be challenging. Did the lecture mention, like, what kind of pushback he got?
Oh, they gave him a hard time. They demanded he kick out the believers who were seen as weak or low class.
Oh, wow. So even back then, there was this kind of social hierarchy, and they were using it against Noah.
Totally. But Noah was like, nope, I'm not doing that. My reward is from God, and I'm not going to drive away those who believe.
Yeah, that's a powerful statement. He refused to compromise his principles just to please the people in power.
Exactly. But that wasn't even the worst of it. They also called him a liar and said he wasn't better than them.
They literally said, we don't see you as being any better than us. Actually, we think you're a straight-up liar, and we see you in clear error. Like, they totally dismissed his message.
Yep. And it's interesting because those kinds of accusations, they weren't unique to Noah. The Quran says that every prophet before him faced the same stuff.
It's like a classic playbook for rejecting the truth.
Totally. And it wasn't just verbal either. They actually threatened Noah with violence. They called him crazy, mocked him while he was building the ark, the whole 9 yards.
Man, that's tough. But it just makes it even more impressive that he kept going for so long. Like, it's no wonder he's considered one of the most steadfast prophets.
Yeah, he really endured it all, physically and emotionally. And in the lecture, Dr. Alchemies actually shares some of Noah's complaints to God about his people. Like, they wouldn't even listen to him. They'd cover their ears, and they just refused to see the truth.
Sounds like a really frustrating situation. But despite all of that, Noah still had so much faith.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah, and it shows in the ultimate challenge he gave to his people. He told them to basically, like, get their act together, gather all their allies and their idols, and do whatever they wanted to him, and to do it now. Like, he was so confident in God's protection that he was basically daring them to try something.
that's wild. He really put it all on the line.
Yeah, it's a powerful statement of faith, right? And it shows how little he cared about their threats because he knew that God was in control.
Totally. Okay, so at this point, things are super tense, right? What happens next?
Well, God reveals to Noah that none of his people are going to believe except for those who already do.
Oh, wow. So that's like a turning point.
Yeah, he realizes that his mission, like the way he's been doing it, is over.
And what does he do then?
He makes a powerful supplication to God, a dua, asking God to not let a single disbeliever remain on earth. He says that if they're allowed to continue, they'll just mislead others and spread their wickedness.
So he's basically acknowledging that they're beyond hope and they're a danger to everyone else.
Yeah, exactly. And what's interesting is that on the day of judgment, when people are begging the prophets for help, Noah will actually mention this du'a he made against his people.
Oh, wow. That's intense. So then we get to the most famous part of the story, right? The ark.
Yup. And even while he's building this massive ship, the people are still making fun of him. They're like, look at this prophet turned carpenter building a boat in the middle of the desert. What a joke.
Yeah, I can imagine the ridicule he faced.
And what's awesome is that Noah basically fires back. He says, if you ridicule us, we will ridicule you right back, just like you're doing now.
Ooh, mic drop.
Right. And Dr. Alchemies connects this to a verse in the Quran where it talks about the believers laughing at the disbelievers on the day of judgment. It's a good total role reversal.
So the ones who are laughing in this life will be the ones being laughed at in the next.
Exactly. Now, there's some debate about how long it took to build the ark. Some say 40 years, others say it took as long as it took for the trees to grow. And there are also some details about the construction, like the 3 levels for animals, humans, and birds, but that comes from Jewish tradition and isn't explicitly mentioned in Islamic sources.
Right. And, getting caught up in those details isn't really the point, right? What's important is that Noah followed God's command, no matter how strange it seemed to others.
Totally. So finally, the flood comes. God commands Noah to load the ark with 2 of every kind of animal, his family and those who believed. And the Quran specifically mentions that only a few people actually believed in him.
Yeah, despite all his efforts, only a handful of people listened.
It's a reminder for all of us, right? Sometimes, no matter how hard we try to guide others, the results might be small. But it's not about the numbers. It's about following God's commands.
Yeah, and ultimately, guidance comes from God alone.
Absolutely. So they set sail, and as they're leaving, Noah says, embark in the name of Allah. He controls its movement and its stillness. My Lord is forgiving and merciful.
Wow, such beautiful words. And then,
Then the floodgates open. The Quran describes it as like the sky pouring rain and the earth bursting forth with springs, and the ark is sailing through these massive waves under God's direct protection.
it must have been a terrifying and awe-inspiring sight at the same time.
Absolutely.
Huh.
And amidst all this chaos, there's this incredibly heartbreaking moment between Noah and his son.
Oh, right. He tries to save his son.
Yeah, he pleads with him, come aboard with us, don't be with the disbelievers. But his son refuses. He thinks he can escape by climbing a mountain.
Oh, that's so sad. Like, even in that moment, he still doesn't believe.
And Noah replies, there's no protection from God's decree today except for those he has mercy on. And then a wave comes and separates them, and his son is lost.
That's a really powerful reminder that faith comes before family. Like, even the closest blood ties don't matter if there's no shared belief in God.
Yeah, it's a tough lesson.
What happened after the flood subsided?
Well, it happened pretty quickly, almost like a dream. God commanded the earth to swallow the water and the sky to stop raining. The ark landed on Mount Judy, and God declared, away with the wrongdoing people.
So, the world was cleansed, and only those who believed survived.
Exactly. And it's worth noting that Noah's wife, she wasn't on the ark either, which implies that she perished along with the disbelievers.
Right. Which brings us back to that important point you mentioned earlier about faith and family.
Yep. The transcript also mentions the stories of Abraham and his father and Lot and his wife as examples of how kinship means nothing in the hereafter without shared faith. It even quotes a verse from the Quran that says, your relatives and your children won't benefit you on the day of judgment. God will judge between you, and he sees everything you do.
That's pretty powerful. And the Quran actually uses Noah's and Lot's wives as an example to warn disbelievers. It says, God presents an example of those who disbelieved, the wife of Noah and the wife of Lot. They were married to 2 of our righteous servants, but they betrayed them, and their husbands couldn't protect them from God. It was said, enter the fire with those who enter.
Yeah, that verse can be misinterpreted, so the lecture actually clarifies what betrayal means in this context.
Oh, right, because some people might think it's talking about, like, adultery.
Exactly. But Dr. Alchemies explains that it's referring to betrayal of faith, not marital infidelity, and he gives a few reasons why.
Like what?
Well, first of all, if they had committed adultery, their own people would totally use that against Noah and Lot. Second, the Quran describes Noah and Lot as righteous men, and good people are generally paired with good spouses, right? And third, adultery alone wouldn't necessarily lead to the punishment of being thrown into hellfire with those who disbelieved in God.
Oh, that's a really important distinction. So it's not about personal failings, but about rejecting faith in God.
Exactly. And the lecture actually points out that anyone who accuses a prophet's wife of adultery is considered a disbeliever themselves.
Makes sense. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground here. What does the lecture say about what happens on the Day of Judgment in relation to Noah?
Well, according to the Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, Noah will be asked if he conveyed God's message to his people.
Yeah.
He'll say yes, of course, but then his people will deny it, saying that no messenger ever came to them.
Oh, wow. So they'll still be denying the truth, even then.
Yep. And Noah's going to ask for a witness, and guess who steps up?
Who?
The Prophet Muhammad and his community. We'll be the ones to testify that Noah did indeed deliver the message. It's actually mentioned in the Quran. And thus, we have made you a just and balanced community that you will be witnesses over the people.
That's a pretty amazing responsibility to bear witness for a prophet like Noah.
It is. And the lecture even gives an example of someone who was known for always telling the truth, even when it was difficult. A guy named Khuzaimah bin Thabit.
Right, so he's like a role model for how we should always strive to be truthful and just, especially when it comes to matters of faith.
Totally. So towards the end of the lecture, Dr. Alchemies reminds us that we don't actually know the exact location or timing of Noah's story. And getting caught up in those details isn't really the point.
Right, like speculating about those things isn't really helpful.
Yep. What matters are the lessons we can learn from it, like the fact that it definitely happened and that the core message is the same for us today, worshiping God alone. And the consequences are still the same. Paradise for the obedient and hellfire for those who reject God.
Right. So to recap, what were some of the key takeaways from Noah's story? Like, what should our listeners be thinking about?
Well, first, just how incredibly steadfast Noah was. Like, he faced insane opposition for almost 1,000 years and never gave up. And then there are the consequences of rejecting God's message, both for individuals and entire societies.
Right? Like, we saw that play out with the flood. And we also learned about how faith is more important than family ties. And finally, that core message of Islam, the worship of God alone.
Exactly. And here's something for our listeners to chew on, something we didn't explicitly cover today. Think about the challenges Noah faced in spreading his message. Like, it was a pretty hostile environment, right? And now think about the challenges we might face today in upholding our own beliefs in a world that isn't always so receptive to faith. How can Noah's story, his resilience, and his trust in God inspire us to stay strong in our own faith, even when it's hard?
Yeah, that's a great point to end on. It's easy to think about these stories as, like, ancient history, but the lessons are so relevant to our lives today.
Totally. And remember, this is just a starting point. We encourage everyone to go back, listen to the original lecture if you can, and keep thinking about all of this. There's always more to learn.
Absolutely. The journey of understanding is never really over. Right.
And we'll be back with another deep dive soon.
Until then, keep learning.